The FedUpward podcast, a place for federal employees and friends of feds to find strategies and tactics to navigate everyday problems.
And now, a quick word from our sponsor.
3, 2, 1.
From launch pads
We have liftoff.
to research labs, civilian Fed life leads to many places, all covered by WAPA. WAPA offers fully portable group term life insurance for current and former civilian Feds. This coverage answers whatever life brings, with benefits that follow wherever service calls. WAPA. For Feds, by Feds.
Hi, folks. This is Love Rutledge, host of the FedUpward podcast, back with the next in our series of shows associated with Globalee's Shaping America's Next 25 Summit. My next guest is Milancy Harris, who has been a rock star in the intel community in federal service for many years, and she is going to cover a variety of topics of interest for federal employees. Milancy, thanks for being on the show.
Happy to be here.
So first, I want to start with your observations from your time working in federal service as a leader. What were your biggest frustrations as a senior leader in the Department of Defense?
Look, I'll give you the same answer I think a lot of feds would give you, which is the bureaucracy sometimes gets in the way of good ideas. The speed at which you can do something is often very frustrating. You know what the end state is, but you have to put things in court. You need to talk to the interagency. You need to clear it with the NSC.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you know that you can solve the problem, but the steps between identification and solving it are often just vexing at all levels.
So vexing. Absolutely. I think a lot of federal employees can resonate with what you just said, because we all bang our heads against the wall sometimes at the bureaucratic processes and steps that govern our lives. If you had one piece of advice for folks who are current federal employees on how to deal with those roadblocks, what would that advice be?
So I think first is understanding the system you're operating in. I think when you really understand how things get done and the process by which you need to do them in a given agency or department, then you can better identify the efficiencies in those processes. You know, sometimes that's clever workarounds, sometimes that's pre-coordination, sometimes that's just a well-placed phone call or email to your boss saying, it'd be really great on the margins of this meeting if you mentioned we were waiting for this component's coordination or something like that. But you really have to understand how the system can be affected to be that effective. The best action officers I've ever worked with are the ones that really understand that, the second you identify what you want to do, you have to start all those conversations at multiple levels so that eventually the bosses, the secretaries, they can sign it.
Absolutely. That's fantastic advice. Thank you for that. I want to turn toward employee development and support. As a senior leader in the federal space, it's hard sometimes to know what resources your employees need. How did you focus on developing the employees who worked for you when you were in different roles in federal government?
So I think early in my career, I was very helped by the fact that the intelligence community takes a pretty structured approach to that. I had a lot of formal training as an intel analyst, and there was a lot of importance placed on making sure that you had the right certifications, the right training, you knew how to use the right tools. I think what I found is when you transition to the policy space, there was less of a defined toolkit. And I tried where I could to encourage peer mentoring. I tried to find new and different trainings or cross-component things that we could bring in that would help folks see how skills are being built in other pieces and parts of the government. But I think really what you need is to foster an expectation with your leadership team that they should be listening to their employees. When their employees say they want a developmental experience or they want a rotation or they want to pursue a joint duty assignment, the answer can't be no, the job is too pressing. We need you in your desk doing your day-to-day. And that's easier said than done, but it's just consistency of message, I think, goes a long way there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of high-performing federal employees in public service across the board are told often, well, you can't go take advantage of that program because you're our highest performing employee, so you're punished for doing a great job. And so there are a lot of perverse incentives within federal service that keep us from enjoying those great developmental opportunities. So if you could recommend a resource or two, a book, a podcast, a website for current federal employees to focus on their own personal development or leader development in general, what would that be?
So the tool I've used the most probably as I grew more senior is podcasts about topics I don't understand. It's like a efficiency hack. If I used to be a big listener to a couple of national security law podcasts because I was working on policy issues that were touched by them, but I'm not a lawyer. And so it was a little bit of a decoder ring that I think gave me an edge when I was trying to think through an issue. As I got involved in technology governance and I got more interested in kind of emerging technologies and their impact in the national security space, I'm a regular listener to a number of podcasts just to feel like I know what's going on and I'm keeping track of the developments in that space. And so I think that's something that easily fits into people's, frankly, often terrible commutes in the Washington, D.C. area for federal employees. But it's been really helpful for me. I think the other thing is that looking beyond your department or agency for training opportunities, some of the best training opportunities I had in my career were actually OPM sponsored courses where agencies have a certain number of seats. And if you know they exist, you can talk to your HR department or your training officer and find out how your department or agency takes applications for them. You meet people that are working, I was sitting in the intelligence community that work at Social Security Administration, but our bureaucratic complaints are exactly the same, right? You start to see the commonality in the federal workforce in a new and different way when you get out of kind of your immediate pocket of it.
Great point. I mean, we're all facing a lot of similar challenges, regardless of what specific subject matter area we're working on. Are there any professional organizations that you would recommend to federal employees who are looking for that cross-pollination?
I think that really depends on what gets your brain going. I have been a term member at the Council on Foreign Relations, which gave me a new and different exposure to different folks in the national security space. I think there are other organizations in town that are really trying to foster that kind of dialogue across the various pieces and parts of the Washington ecosystem. I would encourage folks to think about that because oftentimes if you just go to your department or agency every day, you don't have those organic opportunities to just kind of nerd out about something you're interested in. They exist across the spectrum at think tanks and organizations around town. And honestly, oftentimes they're looking for the new and interesting voices from the federal government to come inject a little dose of reality. What is possible today to do about a problem that folks are debating? And so I do encourage folks to really think about that as a place to get out of their day-to-day.
A little bit of a pivot, different kind of question for you. You have served as a political appointee. If there were a couple of things you wish most career federal employees knew about politicals, what are the things you think feds should know about being a political employee, being a leader in a political appointment job?
I think that not all political appointments are the same, but that the motivation is very, very much the same as most federal employees. People are drawn to public service, and that takes a variety of forms and fashions. I think, assuming that every political appointee doesn't have the experience in the subject matter is probably not fair. I had some 15 years of federal service before I entered as a political appointee, but I had plenty to learn about DoD, about certain issues I was working on. I mean, there was a full range of things I needed tutors and teachers on, but not everyone was like that. Some folks had worked for years and years in the institution that they were assigned to. And so I do encourage folks to really get to know them, but I think start with that kind of assume good intent, assume that the motivation is the same as yours. You just want to make the world a better place and make the government work.
And then flipping that around beyond just getting to know them as politicals coming in who haven't worked in their agency or department, what do you think they need to know about career federal employees?
They're the best teachers you're ever going to have in your life. I really would not have survived the last 4 years without a bevy of teachers at all levels, peers, folks that worked for me, folks from other components who helped me understand the system, how the issue looked from their optic, and really in some cases took me from 101 to a PhD in things that I had no experience in before I took a job.
Okay, last question. What is your best advice for working with peers within your agency or department?
Start with the human touch. Be yourself. I have made some of the best friends of my life through my government service. And a lot of that is in not just asking them for what you need, but in finding out what's going on, how life looks in their corner of the woods that day. I think that goes a long way in building rapport, but also giving you that network to lean on when your component, office, whatever unit is in crisis, right? I had the opportunity to lead several major crisis responses in my time in DoD, and that network, both taking care of me and making sure I was okay, but also leaning forward to make sure their component helped with whatever I needed, was really, really built on that foundation of getting to know folks as people.
Great advice. Always so important to remember the human connection, even when we're doing things that are bureaucratic in nature. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for what you do to support globally and for coming on the FedUpward podcast.
Great. Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.
Clearance Jobs, the leading digital network for cleared professionals, has launched FedWork.net, connecting federal employees with news, insights, and community. The public forum serves as an extension of the Clearance Jobs career community, empowering feds to stay connected and informed. Visit FedWork.net to search and start discussions, and create a free profile at clearancejobs.com to find your next cleared role.
Thanks for listening, friends. If you liked what you heard today, I hope you'll subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend. To join my mailing list, head over to fedupwardcoaching.com/podcast. Talk soon.